The wind howled across the black stones of the Red Keep as the sword neared Ned Stark's neck. Sir Elin Payne raised Ice, the great sword of House Stark, to carry out the king's command. The crowd screamed. Arya watched in horror. Sansa cried beside Joffrey. But as the blade began to fall, something unexpected happened. A voice shouted from the balcony. "Enough!" Queen Cersei stood up, her face tight with control. "You have made your point, Joffrey," she said. "Let the man take the black. Let him rot at the wall like a true traitor." For once, the boy king faltered. He looked between his mother, the High Septon, and the gathered lords. "Very well," he said at last, sulking. "Let him go to the wall. Let him freeze." Ned Stark didn't look up. His neck bled where the sword had touched skin. His pride was shattered, but he was alive. And that was enough. For now, he was thrown in chains, but the execution was halted. That night, Varys visited him in the dungeons. "You have friends still, Lord Stark," the spider said softly, "but more importantly, enemies who fear what your death might bring. War is patient, my lord, but death is permanent. With Jon Arryn dead and Robert gone, the realm was breaking. And Ned, shamed, broken, and branded traitor, was smuggled away under the cover of night to Blackwater Bay, disguised as a merchant's prisoner. The plan was for him to join the Night's Watch. But fate, as always in Westeros, had different plans. The ship that was to take him to Eastwatch by the Sea never reached the wall. Instead, a violent storm scattered the vessel. Half of the men drowned. Ned was rescued by a smuggler's crew loyal to Stannis Baratheon, who had heard whispers of Ned's fate. "You still have value, Stark," said Davos Seaworth as he helped the injured lord onto a skiff. "If the North believes you live, the game changes." Back in King's Landing, Cersei kept the truth hidden. She told the court Ned had died on the way to the wall. Robbers, she claimed. Only a few knew the truth, and most of them were brought into silence. But the North began to stir. Robb Stark, declared king in the North after his father's capture, had started a campaign to avenge him. Now word came, whispers at first, then louder rumors, that Ned Stark lived, hiding, healing, returning. When Ned finally stepped foot again in Winterfell, 2 full moons later, flanked by bannermen who wept to see him, the Old North roared. Back to life, Maester Luwin fainted. The Great John knelt. Even Sir Roderick Cassel couldn't hold back tears. But things were different now. Robb had tasted war. He had commanded men, and Ned had tasted betrayal deeper than any blade. Father and son embraced. But the silence in that hug said everything. The war had changed them both. "I knelt," Ned whispered to his son one night, "for your sisters, for our family. But no more. The Starks will never kneel again." And so began a new campaign, not for revenge, but for independence. The North would no longer answer to Baratheon or Lannister, not for crown nor coin. Ravens flew, banners were called, and across the cold expanse of the North the wolf rose again. But the South was watching, and the wall was growing darker by the day. The ravens flew hard and fast, carrying the truth of Ned Stark's return like wildfire through the icy winds of the North. It didn't take long before every bannerman, every lord with Stark blood in his veins or memories of Winterfell's honor in his heart, turned their eyes northward. The old families, Mormont, Karstark, Glover, even the Boltons, began to murmur, "The wolf is alive," but honor had a cost. And Ned Stark knew better than most. It was never cheap. Winterfell was a shadow of what it once was. The war had emptied it of soldiers. The halls were cold. The courtyard where Ned once trained Robb and Jon echoed with silence. He walked it slowly, touching the walls, remembering his children's laughter and the bloodshed that followed their loss. "I should have taken them all with me," he told Maester Luwin. "I left them here thinking they'd be safe. There's no such thing as safe anymore." Robb had changed too. War had hardened him. He wasn't the boy who begged to ride out with his father anymore. He was a king now, though still young. His council respected Ned's return, but there was quiet. Tension. 2 wolves at the top of the pack. You're back, Robb said one night. But I'm not stepping aside. I fought for them. I bled for them. And I'd never ask you to, Ned replied. I didn't survive to wear a crown. I came back to make sure we all survive this winter. Still, the North couldn't afford a crack between its leaders. Not now. The South thought Ned was dead. That illusion gave the North a precious weapon, secrecy. We let them think I'm a ghost, Ned said during a council meeting with the Northern Lords. A whisper, a shadow that haunts them. That fear alone is worth more than 1,000 swords. Lady Mage Mormont agreed fiercely. The lion sleeps better when it thinks the wolf is dead. Let it sleep, let it dream. Then we bite. But while loyalty surged in some corners, rot festered in others, Roose Bolton watched quietly from the shadows of the great hall. His son Ramsay, a creature of cruelty and sickness, whispered at his side like a serpent. A dead man's return is no miracle, Roose murmured to his steward. It's a threat. The Boltons, always cold and calculating, began to pull away from Robb's command, subtly at first, refusing supplies, delaying messages, and then silence. But Ned suspected them. His time in King's Landing had taught him one thing he hadn't known before. Not all traitors wear their blades on their hips. Some wear smiles. I was raised to believe the worst men were in the south, he confided in Catelyn during a cold night in Winterfell's Godswood, but the worst are the ones who look you in the eye and call you brother. Catelyn nodded, her grief still heavy, her eyes worn from crying over Bran, over Rickon, over Sansa and Arya, both lost in the chaos of war. We are broken, Ned, she whispered, but we're still breathing. That means we fight, and they would, but not just with swords. The North needed grain, steel, ravens, unity. Winter was coming, and they were not ready. So Ned began the hard work of rebuilding. He called smiths from every corner of the land. He sent riders to Last Hearth and Deepwood, Motta asking for timber and tools. He re-established the raven posts, silent wings that could send warning from beyond the wall to every holdfast in hours. But he didn't stop there. He sent word to the Eyrie, to old friends and maybe friends, men like Brynden Blackfish, Tully, and even Petter Baelish, though it burned him to speak that name again. Politics is a poison, Ned said to Robb, but sometimes it's the only medicine left. Robb watched his father more closely now. This was not the same man who rode south with dreams of justice. This Ned was sharper, angrier, more dangerous, and it scared him, but it also gave him hope. Then came the letter from Jon Snow, from beyond the wall, a simple message written in urgency. The dead are walking. The wall is not enough. Ned stared at the parchment for a long time, and for the first time since he'd returned, he looked truly afraid. The Game of Thrones was still being played, but a greater war, a real war, one that didn't care about crowns or lineages, was approaching fast, and the North had to be ready. The message from Jon Snow changed everything. Ned Stark read it over and over again, sitting alone by the fire in the Lord's chambers of Winterfell. He had seen many lies, many manipulations, but this letter, short, desperate, honest, was not one of them. Jon wouldn't lie about something like this. The dead walk, it said. They rise with cold eyes and they do not stop. Ned hadn't seen Jon since the day he rode south. He remembered their last words, vague promises, a shared look, and the secret he had never dared tell his son. But if what Jon said was true, then nothing else mattered now. Not crowns, not thrones, not revenge. The North was already on the edge, strained by war, betrayal, and fear. But how could he tell them they needed to worry about the dead? Most still believed the White Walkers were stories for children. How do you prepare people for a nightmare they've never believed in? He started with Robb, This is what we've ignored for too long, Ned told him, placing the letter on the table. All of us. I thought I was doing the right thing by protecting you from the south, but now the true threat comes from the north. Robb frowned, confused. You believe this? That dead men are rising? Ned's eyes didn't waver. I believe John, and if he's seen this, then the wall won't hold for long. Robb leaned back, the weight of kingship suddenly heavier. Then we'll need allies, men, wildlings even, but we're already bleeding from the Lannisters. Ned nodded. And we'll bleed more. The Lannisters won't wait forever. They'll come north again, not for war, but to end our defiance, and we'll be too weak to stop them. Robb turned the letter over slowly. What do we do? Ned took a breath. We prepare for both, and so Winterfell became a fortress again. The forges burned day and night. Maesters mixed wildfire recipes and studied ancient texts on the long night. Farmers were paid in gold to send grain, meat, and dried fruits to Winterfell. The Stark banner flew higher than ever, not just a symbol of family, but of survival. But not all in the north believed. Roose Bolton remained silent, too silent. His son Ramsay had disappeared from Winterfell weeks earlier, and no one knew where he had gone. And House Karstark, once fiercely loyal, was growing distant. Their loyalty had always been bound to vengeance, not duty. Then came the worst of it. Raven arrived from Deepwood Motte with grim news. Ramsay Bolton had raided the village, burned it, and taken Glover men hostage. Not in Lannister name, not in Stark name, in his own. This is rebellion, said Sir Roderick, slamming his fist on the table. It's worse, Catelyn murmured. It's chaos, and that's what the South wants. A broken North, ununited, vulnerable, Ned agreed. We deal with Ramsay, now, before Roose decides to follow him. Robb stood. Let me lead the army. Ned shook his head. You are the king in the north. You do not chase mad dogs. I will go. Robb hesitated. If you fall, I've already fallen, Ned said coldly. Now it's time I stand again. So Ned Stark marched. He rode with 2,000 men, Mormont's Glovers, even a few wildlings from the Gift who had seen signs of the dead. Their torches lit the night as they moved westward, through snow-covered forests and shattered villages. At Deepwood Motte they found the horrors. Bodies hung from trees, flayed and frozen. Children with missing faces, women locked in kennels. Ramsay Bolton had left a trail of madness behind him, but he was not finished. He waited for them, with his dogs, with his games, and with a trap, when Ned entered the keep under the banner. Of parley, Ramsay welcomed him like a long-lost uncle. So the dead man walks, he smirked, circling Ned like a vulture. I always liked the stories. You die once, come back a ghost. Poetic. Ned didn't flinch. You murdered our people. Ramsay shrugged. They were boring. Then you will die. Ramsay grinned wider. I expected that. But father has other plans. That's when Ned realized Roose had joined his son. The Boltons were rebelling, and worse, they had allied with Southern gold, bought with Lannister coin. Ned rode hard that night, escaping the trap with only half his men. The Boltons had declared open war on House Stark, and now the North was on fire from within, just as the true winter approached from beyond the wall. The sky over the North turned grey with smoke and snow as the Boltons made their move. Roose Bolton, cold and cunning, had allied not just with Southern gold, but with Southern intent to fracture the North from the inside. While the Lannisters licked their wounds in King's Landing, they whispered promises to House Bolton, legitimacy, power, Warden of the North, if they could take Winterfell and deliver Ned Stark's head. The first assault came swiftly. Torrens Square, once a loyal Stark stronghold, was taken by surprise at dawn. The garrison fought valiantly, but the Boltons had come in the dead of night, with flayed men leading their charge. They butchered the defenders and left a message on the gates, written in blood, "Winter belongs to the bold." Ned returned to Winterfell with barely 800 men left. Blooded, sleepless, and haunted by the cruelty he had seen, he sat in silence as Robb paced the great hall. "We ride back out now," Robb snapped. "We burn them to ash. We take their heads." "No," Ned said firmly. "Not yet." Robb turned. "You want us to wait while they take our people? I want us to be smart. You want revenge. I want to win." Catelyn watched them both, two wolves circling the same flame. "If we go to war now, with what we have, we'll lose half. The North to madness. The Boltons don't need to defeat us in the field. They just need to make us bleed enough that the South sees opportunity." Ned clenched his fists. "We don't win this war by fighting it on their terms. We win by uniting the North and exposing the Boltons for what they are." So he sent ravens to every corner of the realm, not as Lord Stark, not even as Warden of the North, but as a father. He told them of the slaughter at Deepwood Motte, the madness of Ramsay, the betrayal by Rose. He called on old oaths, the kind that men had sworn to his father and his father before him. And some answered. House Benderley returned a raven, the North remembers. House Reed sent word. Greywater moves unseen but never forgets. Even House Serwyn, barely holding their lands, pledged men. "We stand with the wolf who walks." But others stayed silent, afraid, waiting. Then the whispers came. Not from the Boltons or the South, but from beyond the wall. Villages in the far north were going quiet. Wildlings who had surrendered to Jon Snow's leadership were disappearing. The weather grew cruel, the nights grew longer, and then came a rider, half dead, eyes frozen, skin grey with cold. He collapsed outside Winterfell's gate, mumbling a single phrase before he died. "They're coming, they don't burn." Ned knew what it meant. He gathered his council that same night. "This isn't just about the Boltons anymore," he said. "If Jon is right, and the Dead March, then we're running out of time. We fight now, not just for land, for survival." Robb looked across the table. "So, what do we do?" "We draw the Boltons out," Ned said. "We let them think they have already won. And then we crush them, with the fury of every house still loyal to the wolf. And then?" Catelyn asked quietly. Ned looked toward the north window, where the snow fell thicker every hour. "Then we prepare for death itself." So the plan was set. House Manderley would feign retreat, drawing Bolton forces toward the coast. The Umbers would take a narrow pass near the Wolfswood, and Ned would lead a small company directly to Dreadfort, to finish what should have been ended long ago. But before he left, he met Robb alone, in the crypts of Winterfell. They stood beside the statue of Lyanna Stark. "There's something." "I should have told you long ago," Ned said. Robb watched him, confused. "What is it?" But Ned shook his head. "Not yet. When the time is right, you'll know. For now, protect your mother. Lead with your heart, but listen with your head. And if I don't return, you will," Robb said firmly. "You have to." Ned smiled, the sadness deep in his eyes. "No one has to do anything in this world, Robb, except die." And with that, Ned Stark rode out one more time, not as a prisoner, not as a traitor, not as a lord, but as the last true wolf of the North, riding to cleanse his land of traitors before the cold took everything. Snow fell like ash as Ned Stark and his riders approached Dreadfort. It was colder than it should have been, a bitter, creeping cold that sank into the bone and whispered of unnatural things. The land around the Bolton stronghold was dead, not just winter dead, but lifeless. Crows circled above, but there were no animals in the woods, no movement in the trees. Even the wind felt afraid. They camped a mile from the fortress. Only 50 men with him, hand-picked, silent, loyal. No horns, no banners, just wolves under grey cloaks. Men who would die for him. Men who had lost too much to fear anything now. Ned stood at the edge of a frozen stream that night, his hand resting on the hilt of his borrowed sword. He missed ice. not because of the steel, but because of what it represented. A house. A name, a line. The North hadn't just lost a sword, it had lost a soul. Roderick Cassell joined him. "You think Rose is truly inside?" Ned nodded. "He's too proud to flee. And Ramsay, he craves the performance." Roderick spat in the snow. "Then let's give them a show they won't forget." The plan was simple. Quiet entry. Swift death. Burn the sigil of the flayed man down to its last thread. But nothing about Bolton's was ever simple. They slipped past the outer gates using stolen keys, taken from a dead guard 2 days earlier during a staged caravan attack. They entered through servant tunnels, past storage chambers, and climbed the inner stone by torchlight and breathless silence until the dogs barked, that horrible wet-throated sound followed by Ramsay's laugh. It echoed through the halls. "I knew you'd come," Ramsay's voice sang in the dark. "My ghost, my dead wolf." Then came fire. Traps sprung. Arrows rained from murder holes. Dozens of Bolton men poured into the narrow halls like rats. Ned's men fought, but they were outnumbered. Still, they pushed forward, cutting down Rose's guards with fury and silence. No battle cry, no chant. Just rage and steel. Ned reached the great hall and found Rose Bolton waiting, sitting calmly beside the flayed throne. Ramsay stood beside him, grinning with 2 crossbows aimed at the door. "I gave you too much credit," Rose said as Ned entered. "Should have let the boy die in the south. You'll answer for Deepwood Mort," Ned growled. Rose rose, slow and snake-like. "I only ever did what the North needed." "You betrayed your blood," Ned snapped. "You made deals with those who murdered children," Rose sneered. "The North doesn't need children, it needs survivors." Then the fight began. Roderick and the remaining men burst in behind Ned. Arrows flew. Ramsay shot wildly, then pulled out blades, screaming like a feral beast. He lunged for Ned, but the old wolf still had speed. He dodged, grabbed Ramsay by the throat, and slammed his head into the stone wall once, twice, 3 times. Blood poured like wine. Ramsay laughed through broken teeth. "I'll live forever," he hissed. Ned drove his sword through the bastard's throat. "No, you won't." Rose tried to flee, but Sir Roderick caught him at the steps and ran him through without ceremony. It was not a duel. It was a cleansing. When it was done, Ned walked to the center of the hall. He pulled down the flayed man banner and threw it into the fire. No one spoke for a long time. Then Roderick looked at him. "It's done." But it wasn't. Not far away, near Last Hearth, a rider arrived bearing worse news than betrayal. The wall had fallen. Eastwatch was gone. Not attacked, not taken, shattered. Jon Snow had sent one last raven before the storm consumed them. The Night King rides a creature of flame and frost. He flies. The wall is broken. Ned read it in silence, the blood on his hands still warm. And yet he felt cold. Winter wasn't coming anymore. It was here. And now, with the Boltons dead, the North had one chance to unite or die as shadows beneath a pale sky. The snow didn't stop falling. It came thick and heavy, blotting out the sun, swallowing the land in silence. Winterfell was no longer a fortress. It was a last breath, held between life and death. Fires burned in every hall. Watchmen lined the walls day and night, and every blacksmith in the north had been pulled to the yard to forge weapons of dragonglass, what little Jon Snow had sent from his store before the wall fell. Ned stood atop the ramparts, looking toward the white horizon. Somewhere out there, the Night King moved, not with an army, but with a tide. A slow, frozen flood that consumed every village in its path. The Boltons were gone, but they had only been a storm cloud. This was the storm. Robb joined him, dressed in hardened leather and mail, looking far older than his years. "We sent ravens to the Eyrie, to Riverrun, even to King's Landing," he said quietly. Most haven't answered, and the ones that did called us mad. Ned didn't flinch. We were always alone. The northern houses had gathered. Not all, but many. Manderley, Reed, Glover, Umber, Mormont. Each had sent what they could. Farmers turned archers. Blacksmiths turned spearmen. Children trained to carry messages between towers. It wasn't an army. It was a wall of names and memories, the last sons of dead fathers, standing where no one else would. And then Jon Snow arrived. He came not with banners, but with a broken host of wildlings and Night's Watch survivors. His face was older, harder, his eyes hollow. He embraced Ned in the yard, not as a commander, not as a bastard, but as a son who had returned from hell. "I tried to stop him," Jon whispered. "I failed." Ned didn't ask for details. The look in Jon's eyes told enough. He had seen the Night King. He had seen what came behind him. Later that night, under the weirwood tree, Ned finally told Jon the truth. "You are not my son," he said, his voice low and steady. "You are Lyanna's. Your father was Rhaegar. Targaryen." Jon didn't speak, he just stood there, the truth cracking through his heart like thunder. "I hid it to protect you," Ned continued. "And I would do it again. But the time for hiding is over." Jon shook his head slowly. "What am I supposed to do with that? I'm not a king." "You're more than a name," Ned said. "You're the bridge. Stark and Targaryen, fire and ice. If there's any hope left for Westeros, it lives in you." But there was no time to wrestle with the past. The dead were moving fast. By the next dawn, scouts returned with news. "They are here." The great battle began at twilight. First came the winds, unnatural, howling, shrieking, then the shadows, thousands of them. The dead marched in silence, their eyes glowing blue, their faces twisted with frozen agony. They climbed over their own kind, forming hills of flesh and bone. Winterfell's walls trembled, catapults launched barrels of fire, arrows rained from the towers, flaming trenches were lit, and still they came. Ned fought on the front line, alongside. Jon and Robb, his sword, reforged from northern steel, cut down whites like wheat. But there were always more, endless, mindless. Ghost ran through the dead like a white blur, ripping through limbs. Giants, dead ones, smashed through gates. The north bled in the snow, and then he came. The Night King atop the dead dragon, Viserion. He descended with frost and flame, turning walls to rubble. One blast of his icy breath shattered the main tower. Men screamed. The godswood caught fire. Ned and Jon charged toward him, but the Night King raised his arms, and the dead rose again. Even fallen friends, Roderick Castle, Lady Mormont, men who had died minutes before, now fought against their brothers. Jon was knocked back by the undead dragon's tail. Ned pushed forward, cutting through a circle of whites, until he stood face to face with the Night King beneath the heart tree. They stared at each other. Two cold, silent figures. Then the Night King raised his sword. Ned fought like a man, with nothing left to lose. He dodged the first blow, parried the second, cut deep on the third. But the Night King didn't bleed. His wound froze shut instantly. The blade shattered against him. Then the Night King struck. A piercing blade of ice sank deep into Ned's side. Ned gasped, falling to one knee. The world slowed. Snow fell like feathers. And then Arya, from the shadows, fast as lightning. A blur of vengeance. She leapt. She struck. The dagger, dragonglass, slid into the Night King's chest, and he shattered. The dead fell instantly. The air grew still. Jon ran to Ned, catching him before he hit the ground. Blood soaked the snow beneath them. "I'm glad it was her," Ned whispered. Jon gripped his hand. "You're not dying, not like this." Ned smiled faintly. "Tell her. Tell them all." The wolf did not kneel, and with that, Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, the man who should have died in chains, finally rested. The battle was over. The North had survived, and the tale of the man who lived when he shouldn't have, only to lead when no one else could, passed into legend, a quiet ghost of honor in a world that had forgotten what that meant.